Доброго дня.
Hello, dear participants of Geopolitical Dialogues, because in addition to those who are participating here, of course, on this improvised scene of Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, there are also people who are watching us, those who are discussing, who are here with us directly. I'm very glad to see all of you. And it's a very important project for me, I would say, because it is very interesting. We have interesting guests. We always have some new opinions, and we always have more of strategic vision than every day as it is done in the comments. So I think that today you will see that. And we will be together with Pavlo Klimkin today. And I think that senior advisor of the Carnegie Foundation for International Peace, as well as a member of advisory board of Poverty Driven Foundation, advisory board, supervision board, I'm sorry. And also, Pavlo Klimkin as the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine in 2014-2019, the years when the war has started. In this period, in the 21st century, and well, actually, the years that can answer many questions that we have nowadays, that is from my point of view. So I would like to start our discussion straight away, and it will consist of discussing issues that are interesting for everyone, I guess, both in Ukraine and Europe and in the world. And maybe also a bit later from those more strategic issues, maybe not obvious ones. We would also like to discuss those and to hear that from Pavlo Klimkin, because I will say that straight away. I will just reveal my vision. This will be more related to the first specialty, not as a diplomat, but the specialty where people are looking more up on the sky and the space, and not just one day on Earth or a few days. I will start with a question which is interesting for me, and I'm asked also quite often about that. In order to understand where to move, we need to know where we are. At first, how can we name the situation in geopolitics, maybe the format of war or wars? Is that Third World War, or it's a regional conflict or a local war? Where are we now? Simple question, seemingly simple. You can answer that in a more simple way or in a more complicated way, but taking into account those 10 years already, 10 years. So do we understand what does the enemy want? In this case, we are talking about Russia and Putin. What is the aim? To destroy Ukraine, or maybe to fight in big geopolitics, and Russia is attempting to come back to the Soviet Union, to the circle of superpowers, those who are just making fates, or it's just to grasp the territories? Because once Putin has said that, well, it's not bad that we captured part of Ukraine, that we took part of Ukraine. What do you think about that? I'm always glad to be in the center. I like the thesis about that something happened not long ago, and actually the center started its existence since Maidan. It's actually not that long ago, but it seems that it's an eternity. A few weeks ago, one of my good American friends told me a joke about the tourist, which is walking somewhere in Massachusetts, let us say, and he is on the hills. He comes to some farmer and he says, like, how do I come back to Boston? And that says, well, it's a bad point for a start, for a return, actually. We are not in the best point like to start, but we cannot change it. As for the fact where we are, there is endless number of thoughts that people have, those people whom I consider to be more bright than I am. And what I also think, all of that is coming to a very simple opinion, that a status quo after the Second World War, formally it is preserved. However, it's not functioning and it won't function for the perspectives. That means that at a certain point, and nowadays no one understands, this world will be different. It will work on different principles. We have UN, a certain general framework, which is not functioning, including its statute, because we have the country aggressor who is in the Council of Safety, and they can do whatever they want. And the logics of international law, it's relevant logics, and everybody is interpreting that as they want. And the same about international humanitarian law. So we came to the point where formally, we have, well, maybe not on paper, because fortunately no one's using the paper anymore, but somewhere we have those principles, and everybody is doing that if it's beneficial, and they are interpreting that the way which is beneficial for them. So it is obvious that this cannot exist for the prospects, because once we will collapse. I think that we do understand the motivation of main players. I am not pretending to understand it in all the details, but the motivation of today's Russian regime is quite clear. They want to remain, well, first of all, the key world power, that is, those all like worries and things they are living through in pain, they are very alive. And today's Russian management, they will not step aside from this. Maybe at some point there will be others who will see Russia differently, but not today for sure. The whole world, both Western and not Western, sees Russia as a reality which is dying step by step. They even found some term for that, the line in power. However, it's dangerous for many and in general for the whole system. So, why is it dangerous? Well, it is dangerous because those who understand that they are kind of regressing and they want to come back to reality that they were drawing somewhere on subconscious level, they are acting rationally but different than we. That is, rationality that exists in Moscow and Kremlin is different from classical rationality. Therefore, what do we do with this Russia? How do we stop them? How do we make them less safe in this environment? Regarding that, the world has neither consensus nor general opinion. They have different ideas that are coming up step by step in the West, and they are widely spread there. But actually, the West is moving towards let us build something new. Something that will be in multipolarity. No one understands what it is, actually, but let us live the way we want to live based on the minimum of problems. As for now, for the new multipolarity, there are neither written nor unwritten rules. Nothing that would be functioning. It's just on the level of some agreements where it is functioning. Somebody thinks, yeah, that's okay. Where it's not functioning, well, it's not okay. So ASEAN is presented with this approach when this is working. So let us take into account the problems and worries of each other. And somehow we will figure it out in this world. And the part of today's ideology that Russians have or what they want to build is related to the fact that they want to present Russia as European country and they won't succeed in here. Of course, they are not European. It's schizophrenic in a sense that Russian culture is such, like in the 19th and 20th century, well, they're like big Russian roots, and mainly all are Germans and French, no own language, mainly French. Well, by the way, I was telling a funny story recently, I guess. Well, two German journalists, when Pushkin came to Odessa, he came to the library. I guess he loved to read. And this story is checked because it is told in Odessa Literature Museum. So Pushkin found there a lot of books in French, Italian, German, and some other languages I don't remember already, but he didn't find not a single book in Russian. Literally. Not like there were one or two. He didn't find that. That is Odessa and Odessa cultural life. It was not like and something like that. Of course, it was connected to Europe. And I told the story at first. They didn't believe me. And they called to Odessa. And just now they realized that there are some things. And it's actually very hard to get that even for our Western friends. However, what kind of ideology do we have in present Russia? If that is civilization, well, okay, some post-Byzantium civilization, but how does it function without Ukraine? And if it's not functioning, then it's better not to have Ukraine at all. So this is the logics of action and mentality of today's Russian management as I see it. Well, still, that is interesting. I didn't want to ask about that, but that is still a question even for ourselves because we are trying to rethink about a lot of things and we have some processes that we could not expect earlier regarding attitude to Russian culture. The most interesting thing is that people started thinking about the roots of Russian culture. Somehow we did not think about that earlier and they sold everything to us, so to say, in the period of more like Soviet Union and they had their selection, what is Russian culture. However, still, if we dive deeper, so to say, then it is very different in Kazan, St. Petersburg, or like Sakha Republic. I don't know what kind of culture is there in Yakutsk. Well, I met people. I met one person who is participating in war right now in order to liberate Sakha Republic from Moscow's management. So there is a battalion in the armed forces of Ukraine, and they do a great job because now they are in the front line and they have a really difficult point. They want to liberate their country. I would like to remind it to those who maybe forgot it a bit when there were months of when Soviet Union was being destroyed. Some republics, they also mentioned that they want to be independent, including Yakutia, Sakha. They made the decision, but still later on, Moscow authorities at the time, more progressive than Soviet Yeltsin, they started a discussion and they started speaking about certain consequences, about economic impacts, and at the end, they decided not to do that. And now I just think, how did they decide this? Because those people, they told me different story. And in Tatarstan, they told how they were doing that consciously. So that they are removing some influencers and how Soviet teams were. Like the logics is the same. Karabakh, Azerbaijan, Armenia. What did Soviet officers do? They were sent there, and I have witnesses of that. And they get the permit to shoot both people from Azerbaijan and people from Armenia. And indeed, that was a horrible moment when they were shooting both ends and no one was interested in the development of the country. We can speak a lot about the Russian culture. I would just like to say one thing. We have one person whom we both know, and he's in a position in Moscow. He was director of Department of the post-Soviet countries. But once he said something really harsh. There were deputy ministers of foreign affairs and heads of countries of Central and Eastern Europe, and they invited, and he started with offending them. He said that you are no one. It was long ago. That was back like dozens of years ago. But the approach itself, and I publicly asked, tell me please, what is your national origin? What are your roots, blood? He didn't answer, but that was well known. I could answer. 1/4 German, 1/4 from Armenia, and half Jewish. That's it. And by the way, this is Russian chauvinist as of today. And the Russian Empire, look, the Academy of Sciences of Russia. Well, we can look through the list, but 95%, those are foreigners. Foreigners. And you can check that, not Russians. One Russian was Lomonosov, I guess, and we don't know for sure where he was going because we just know that he was going from one place to the other place, and then they are telling us a story which is just Karamzin is giving some evidence. I read all those stories. They are fake. I am comparing that, and now I see that it's from the empire. Berdyaev, just read the Berdyaev at the time when we were at school. It's progressive, interesting. And for Soviet Union, read him now. That's totally different. By the way, he was born not far from Kyiv, and he was studying here. So our people just came to the first part of the assessment. I don't know, Bulhakov. That's obvious. And there are such platforms that seemed revolutionary to us back in the 90s. Maybe somewhere we went further than Russia in those years, at least in this direction, and I am assessing our system of management absolutely clearly. I still think that it is weaker than Russian. Unfortunately, and this is impacting the situation, but I even think that we went further than they did in the assessment of cultural and historical situation, because they were always boasting that they are the first ones. Now, I don't think so. It seems to me that the things happening in Ukraine, these are revolutionary changes that now are faster than Russia. Well, actually, we should evaluate them properly, because all those years they had some scientific schools, and in order for it to exist, there should be some preconditions, and they should be scientific, cultural. In addition to that, mythology, empire mythology, it has to be created in this or other way, and it is involving people into it. And in my opinion, that what is fundamental problem there? It's evolution of the regime. Meaning that, okay, if you're not interested in politics and you are not doing nothing to distract us from reforming Russia and looking into the future, then sit in your niche. Now everything changed. And now just do with us. If you won't, then who are you? The second moment, this logics and cultural and scientific, which significantly was empirical for empire, and it doesn't matter what kind of genealogy it had, it was working. No matter how many exclusions were there for reloading of this thinking, this mentality, empire mentality, Soviet mentality. That's a conscious construction that is in there. Without this construction, it doesn't work. So they are supporting that on purpose, yes. And indeed, in these, I don't know how many years it was. Actually, that's a question for sociologists to look at that with more attention. Well, first of all, we realized the sense of identity. We were in touch with world culture and world achievements, the things that we did not have in Soviet Union. Well, we had that, but again, in the framework of Soviet Union, and we could open our eyes to many things, and this is a process which is still lasting, actually. However, we could do it. Yeah, it was difficult. Yeah, we paid crazy price for that. But I still do remember how some years ago, before Maidan, still, just like some holiday, all the TV channels were showing some quasi-Soviet movies and some Soviet things, and that was reloading. And at a certain point, we realized the cost of this reloading, and this process hasn't ended. In today's reality, Russia, is it real federation or not? It should have some ideology which is uniting all of them. Otherwise, the processes that will happen inside might become unpredictable. And by the way, they might be unpredictable in different directions. And that means that further on, this ideology will be introduced. They will try to say that there is separate civilization. It's not European, it's not Asian. It's somehow unique. In order to build ideology of the civilization, they need to destroy Ukraine. And it's not that about the territories. It's not about capturing some territories, because as you mentioned, it's important, because once Putin said that, okay, I caught a part around the Azov Sea, and it's like Peter the First was dreaming about that. Yeah, and he truly believes that. Yeah, he thinks that getting new territories, that is the thing that Russians like. And indeed, the big part of Russian population likes that, because Russia was expanding for quite some time, and this feeling of expansion and let us be bigger, and that means that we will be more powerful, more cool. Well, actually, it is supported by the Soviet and by the empire mentality, and that will be done further on. At a certain point, the understanding will come that the world is not about the territories anymore, and this understanding will come quite soon. But that will happen from crisis to crisis, even though any politics is developed from crisis to crisis. But the fact that we opened our eyes, it is the reality which gives us the opportunity to look at the world, and for the world to look at us with totally different eyes. Yeah, it's clear. So it's something that is obvious, but still thinking for the perspective. Next to us, we have totally different country. We have different country in terms of understanding some basic issues. How did it happen? Well, it happened surprisingly, because in 30 years this cannot happen. Maybe they just didn't kill till the end the things that Ukrainians have, or Austria and Hungary, and they returned faster. But well, we have a lot of people with Soviet identity, and not only in the Crimea, not only in Donetsk and Luhansk with local identity, which actually is not Ukrainian, but it's local. We are from Donetsk, we are from Luhansk, but there are many people who, like many people stayed in Kiev as for the war with Soviet identity. That is weird, but not many of them in comparison with the previous period, however, nevertheless. So let us consider that the country there is different, and war and Putin made a huge step forward. because something that could have been lasting for dozens of years, he made that in a really harsh manner and quickly. Because we understand that in Ukraine it won't even happen just like in Georgia, because those wounds are much deeper and returning to previous understanding. No, that won't happen. However, this period we are taking a few dozens of years, other country, other approaches, which still wants to, yeah, I agree here, sooner or later, make its goals. Well, we will just think, if we won't have the word like capitulation of Ukraine, but it will be in any signed agreement if we come up to that, some signed documents between Ukraine and Russia, that will be capitulation of Ukraine in Russian information field. That is for sure. And then if all of a sudden Ukraine wants to make some steps forward, we have historical analogies that are not that good, but when Finland signed with the Soviet Union the agreement about the peace, they gave 500,000 people who left from the Finnish territories. They gave the territories, the military base. Like, it seems that they gave away everything, and they wrote that we are living peacefully, always. And then they came to Sweden, which for them, just like now for Ukraine, USA, yeah? Or like France, Germany, this country is more powerful and it could make some impact. Let us sign the agreement now. Now we are totally neutral. Let us sign together about joint protection. What did Moscow say? No, 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 no. We signed the agreement about not attacking, and that will be the attack to us. And what did they do? Even 2 weeks hadn't come to an end, but they already attacked, in spite of the agreement. So in this situation, it's just obvious for me that as soon as Russia sees, after some agreement with Ukraine, some steps of ours, they will say it's violation of that peace, big peace that we achieved by capitulation of Ukraine. Now Ukraine goes on, and Russian people are asking what kind of capitulation the Ukraine have if they can move on. So I have such an opinion that in addition to like closing ourselves somehow with some barrier from Russian territory, I don't know, maybe Belarus as well. Now I can't see any different way. We need to just close ourselves somehow for dozens of years if we don't want to face all the time the fact that you, as a minister, you were witnessing after the Crimea what they were doing from their territory. They were hitting Ukraine from their territory. It's a confirmed fact without entering our territory, including those from artillery colleges. They had the exam and they were hitting Ukrainian villages. So what do we do under the conditions of course, that is a question that I don't have answer to that, But what do we do in these conditions, the model of safety? If we agree that we need to separate, and from your words, we are not expecting that something will happen to their regime or like fragmentation, this scenario. Well, we need to make a pause, to take a pause for us, for ourselves to develop. And NATO doesn't give us any invitation, and also the big question how NATO would have worked in this situation, even though it's only living structure in Europe, neutrality. But Putin is saying, by the way, I never asked about your attitude regarding this, Paul Anatolyevich, and yeah, we won't say the surnames. Who advised Putin to add the phrase about declaration, Ukrainian Declaration of Independence, where it says that in the future Ukraine aims at being neutral and not nuclear state? Who did it? By the way, those are people we've been working with, and they were members of the group of the 16th of July. You can see this initiative, 16th of July, and 16th of July, I don't remember what was it. Okay, I will tell you. 16th of July initiative that united famous Ukrainian diplomats Alexander Chali, Konstantin Hryshchenko, with some of the actors of Medvedchuk team who are now in Ukraine, and they are working on political comments. And some people, and I respect their opinion actually, just like those two diplomats, even though, like, no matter how much I'm against their position, but those are experienced people in our system. Because Alexander Chali, they are well-known people, and they combine their efforts to make sure that, Ukraine has to take this declaration, this document, as a base of our politics, not the constitution, which is showing now the aspiration of Ukraine to participate in NATO. Unfortunately, that was used by Moscow, and these phrases in the preamble, fortunately, of the agreement which was not signed about the capitulation. The same phrases. It's not true, because anyone will say that from Verkhovna Rada that it was about the Soviet Union actually, and recently Yuri Kostenko was here and we were talking about that, about the status without any nuclear weapons. So it's Soviet Union, it's USSR that is stepping aside from Soviet Union, from Russia, but somehow people are still playing with that in order to, like, the neutral status, maybe it will solve something. And it seems that we already participated in those attempts of negotiations with Russia, where they saw that that's not what they need at all. Nevertheless, neutral status and some of the options, whether it's a wall. Then the third thing are safety agreements. Not the guarantee, but still some kind of a track. And there are some other models. Still, I would like to hear your opinion. What model is needed and which model is realistic? Membership in NATO for Russia, it's not about the change of threats. Because with the same success from the territory of today's Finland, something might flow, as it is mentioned in minutes, of the rockets that are approaching. Membership in NATO, it's the logics which is living inside about the fact that Ukraine doesn't exist and there is either Russia or anti-Russia. And the membership in NATO is fundamentally different from what today Russian management is considering to be Russia. And it undermines the very logics, as they say, of Russian civilization. So I don't believe the neutrality. By the way, occupation of the Crimea happened when formally in Ukrainian constitution, well, it's not quite neutrality, it's being behind the bloc. Legally it's not the same, but politically these are quite similar things. Yeah, it is mentioned. Yeah, it's like here, if you allow me, because it became the reason for my dismission. They had that in military doctrine. They had that in the law on internal and external policy. Second, not just being behind the bloc, but a lot of conditions that showed us that we are not going, like a Kharkiv agreement about some military base on the territory of Ukraine. It was not just a country with no bloc, but they made all the things regarding the neighbors. I fundamentally don't believe the concept of neutrality with Russia, because Russia never considered our independence as real. So we were in the field how they thought of their fundamental interests. I remember perfectly 2003, when there was an attempt to put on our head the joint economic space, so to say, and to take the gas and transport system for the consortium with Germans, but as a matter of fact, we gave like 50+1 action to Gazprom, Russian. And when it all did not succeed, and by the way, I'm very happy that I participated in stopping that as just as a diplomat, as part of the team. But then was Tuzla and Orange Revolution, and we remember all of that perfectly. By the way, thank you very much, because I forgot this story of the 16th of July, that actually it happened. However, the neutrality, it's not an option for Ukraine. At the same time, and I'm always trying to explain that, even though for many people it is very complicated and it's even painful for them to perceive, I believe in our membership in the EU and NATO, but it doesn't mean that when we are connected, we can sit and relax and we will say that, okay, NATO will do something instead of us, Article 5, etc., etc. No, I think that in case if today's regime will be preserved, and by the way, it doesn't matter like what kind of personas will manage Russia, or there will be some reloading to different regime. There will always be a threat for us, and we will always need critical potential. For stopping them, we do understand that in the 21st century, it is different from the 20th century, because in the 20th it was nuclear weapon, whether it's biology or artificial intelligence. In 2020, no one can say that, but not biology, I guess. No, biology, because it's forbidden by the convention. No, I don't mean biological weapons. These insects manipulation, DNA manipulation, it's not biology. I think that we need systems that will be able technologically to lead us forward, that will make a link in between computer systems, artificial intelligence, and us, and it will allow us to have the war of the 21st century. That is what I'm saying, because now we have the war of the 20th century with the help of IT technologies and drones. And we, in order to stop Russia, have to get the possibilities of the 21st century. And here, a lot of experts now are having the discussion that if NATO won't happen tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, whether we shouldn't go to some logics of the weapons of mass destruction. I'm not a fan of that story. I think that this story in the 21st century, it won't help us, and I'm always telling a tiny short story that my professor on mechanics told me about the Einstein who gave the tasks to students, and one person raised his hand and he says like, but this is the same task that we had 2 years ago. And he says like, but the answers have changed. So I think that the answers have changed also for some critical support. Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting, but there is joint understanding. That's already obvious. Everyone is talking about that. As you mentioned, like I've heard that on the conference Future in Review in the USA. Well, it was about people like some NASA engineers or people who have had the Nobel Prize. Yeah, everyone's talking about that. But the only question, I guess, that I have, if we could, and the war is a catalyzer, it makes the nations to do everything possible. And I don't see us having some serious, well, not results, but money involved in this direction. I disagree. I actually see some interesting projects. I see some opportunities for the breakthrough. And I think that we need to develop the capacities in the field that will help us be on the same level with today's Russian reality in the weapons of 21st century. And we will have this chance. And for this chance, and it's a very important moment, we will need the support. Well, not support, but cooperation with our partners. All of it, absolutely. It's not reducing the possibilities of NATO. I think that NATO is also a very important story. But again, the answers have changed. Yeah, I agree, and I totally share this point. It's just I faced in my work, in reality, the fact that with the fact of like beneficial production of like rocket carrier with Ukrainian engines, diplomacy worked and we succeeded so that the Russians stopped taking engines from Russians only for some period. And the Senator McCain helped us at the moment. By the way, I remember perfectly the story, and he deserves a lot for the things that he did in Washington. Yeah, if we recall him this way, then I would say that you met him a few weeks before his death, 2 months before. Yeah, on the 10th of June, he had this funeral, and also Morgan Williams the day before yesterday. I will also say it here because it's the person whom we have to know, the American person who dedicated 30 years of his activity to build business relationship with Ukraine and America. And so sorry because it was an active person who was helping us for many years. And Morgan Williams is a good and polite and patriotic American. And he was working together with us to build Ukrainian-American relationship. Coming back to engines, there was political will. So the remnants of the engines were supplied. However, then we had the possibility to manufacture the engine. So we made that already. We just had to prove the testing and we had to build it. And at the same time, yeah, I know why it did not happen. Unfortunately, those reasons are making me less optimistic than you are regarding Ukrainian success in artificial intelligence or in those issues. The only way is to combine our science and our enthusiasm with the technological base. Well, here I have to mention that either we should be optimistic or we have to lose. We have no other chances. No, but that is the complicated question. If we have a strategy, there should be a plan. So our question, how do we stop Russia? We might think about artificial intelligence for a long time, that we will find it somewhere and it will be built in here. Or we can build rockets for a small distance or average distance. Well, one doesn't exclude the other one. Well, if not, if using artificial intelligence for such a rocket shield, I agree. I am just looking like there is a successful program for drones and we can see where they go. And yeah, we can call the drones only maybe according to the old books about Afghanistan and Iraq. And those are small planes that are functioning without a pilot. And when you see this picture, maybe it's because Russians are not really succeeding in artificial intelligence. Because as for now, the usual planes are flying, not big ones, as Rus, the German, gave on the Red Square. So now they are successfully landing in Mozdoko. By the way, just pay attention that Mozdoko, when they were bidding, I am reducing that a bit, but the language when this video was recorded, the Ukrainian drone is flying, but the language is not Russian. The language is of Northern Ossetia. So my question, what does Russian base make there? In Northern Ossetia, I know that perfectly, and you know, and I understand that perfectly. It's not needed there. It is there for Northern Ossetia, for those people They don't need it. So those who are looking at the drone, they are thinking when they will get away from their territory, and they are afraid of Russians because Russians came to conquer them. But subconsciously, he's thinking like it's in his roots from his ancestors. So we understand that we have to combine non-nuclear weapons with new technologies, and there's not much that I can say. Okay, then nature is changing. The concepts are changing, including like NATO concepts. And it's very important for us to be part of it. Even on our way to NATO, we were part of NATO reality and NATO concept. As for today, the consensus is somehow coming together that the future safety system has to be against this Russia. If against, then this is totally logical that it has to be focused on supporting Ukraine. And I absolutely agree that it will be very difficult for us to develop that ourselves because we have lack of intellectual and financial resources, but we are doing many things like dozens of times faster than our partners, and they are teaching us in that, and we are learning from them. So I do believe in the fact that already in the nearest future, it doesn't mean tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, but in the nearest perspectives, we will have some potential to stop them. It will be better than today's Russia has. And nuclear weapons, yep, that is important. That is important, and this makes Russia still a global player. But in my opinion, this will become not an easy story. And if we won't have adequate models for safety, I think that many people will go to the dissemination of nuclear and non-nuclear weapons. I'm not talking about Ukraine because I do believe in the Western system of safety, but it's about the world, and the world will become very dangerous. Yeah, here I do agree. And if we are talking about weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons, my question is the following. Well, actually, in 2022, when Russia has started this threatening with these nuclear things, well, actually, they violated a lot of legal documents, etc. And that is not surprising for anyone anymore. But they are using that further on, and now they are sending their ships to Cuba, even though it seems that education happened earlier. But the subcontext now is the Caribbean crisis, something similar. And in this sense, the concept of stopping was aiming more at preventing some big blocks, and it included nuclear threats. Now, you mentioned, and I just share this, that we have to become the part of NATO concept, but the NATO concept is changing to the concept of not allowing us go there. In this concept, NATO is placing their troops on the territory of Eastern NATO members. That is the brigade, German brigade, will be in Lithuania. 4,500 they are planning already now. They started doing that. It will take a few years. Poland wants Americans to place tactical nuclear weapons on their territory. There is political consensus with Poland. Other countries, they are not waiting for artificial intelligence to do something. They are placing conventional troops, tanks, paratroops, etc. on their border. We are not in this concept as for now, but yeah, I have my own opinion in this regard, and I want to impose that on you. So what do you think about the opportunity that Ukraine, without being a NATO member yet, will develop the training programs on its territory more actively, maybe together, like joint participation of NATO representatives, including military, then control the weapons. So briefly, Macron's initiative and presence of troops. Well, troops, it's very loud. We are not talking about NATO right now, about bilateral relationship. So what do you think about it? First of all, do we need that? Secondly, is that realistic? I mean, the nearest time, I mean, this year. And thirdly, how that will impact our idea of political decisions. Well, I don't know whether it's realistic this year. However, I do think that it will end up with conventional presence of our partners here on our territory, and at the same time, most probably we will achieve agreements of even like political agreements about the fact that nuclear weapons, NATO weapons, etc., won't be placed on our territory under certain conditions. That is, conventional presence, yes. Nuclear presence, no. And such a model, which is even not related to the formal political decision regarding the NATO membership, has to work because it's the only model which actually ensures minimal perception of safety here inside and externally for Ukraine, and is creating clear safety reality. Any other model, in my opinion, is not working in the conditions when, as for now, making decision about formal membership is postponed, and it is postponed due to the war and due to the fact that in case of some movement towards that, the war might have the new escalation. So I do think that any predictable safety reality without conventional presence and troops and other infrastructure elements in our territory are impossible. I just cannot make any other safety system. And I also see that mentality of our partners, and it's not just Macron, even though French people are discussing that for quite some time on the military level. Also, that mentality is moving towards this. That won't be the NATO presence. It's political, but it will be a presence, well, of certain coalition of those who want to. Those who are ready to get involved into the story, but if there will be no safety, then actually the country cannot function. Who's gonna invest into this country? I mean, not just financially, but just to invest from inside and from outside. And if we will have conventional presence, that will be a certain framework, transition framework for the future. And I do think that this framework will be approved, just like it is already being discussed. A lot of options are discussed, and it's not about the training, I mean full presence. Full presence of troops. It doesn't mean that we will need so many systems and brigades, etc., but this has to be a critical level, which will show that this is actually the part of stopping them and part for ensuring safety as certain compromise, and though maybe we don't like this option on our way towards others, in particular NATO, or some bilateral or multilateral guarantees for safety. And now this option is being discussed as well. And actually, I do see that in the Asian space, in spite of the fact that Americans have, with Koreans, of course, Southern Koreans, or with Japanese people, they have agreements that, in many ways, in my opinion, are not worse, or maybe in some part are more cool than what is written in Article 5. Still, they are considering the necessity of presence, conventional presence, which will be bigger. And they are thinking about availability of additional stopping mechanism. So again, nuclear potential, something that I see as of today. It's a no. Conventional potential? Yeah. Well, that is my prognosis at least. Well, actually, it's absolutely clear for me also that it will move in this direction. What is unclear for me is why is it so slow in dynamics? Because it's obvious that, for example, joint system of air defense or some elements of coordination or joint actions on the border of Ukraine with Poland and Romania and hitting those drones or rockets, it should happen now. It should be there. I will say one thing. We have the legal basis for that on bilateral level. So today everyone is paying attention to safety agreements, just fine, and safety agreements, those that are there now, some extra track. So it says nothing about the conditions for placing the troops, but look at our agreement about defense with Poland, which is still in force. There are even opportunities like how this is happening, that Polish instructors on our territory, how they are working, what is the rights for them. This is the first agreement necessary to give the opportunity in case of anything to participate on the territory of the country, because there are some nuances, even taxes, and it's weird, and the conditions of war, but responsible for crimes, etc., etc. They have it with Korea. Americans have that with Japan for NATO countries. And I didn't see that with Taiwan, but Korean is 7 points. That's agreement 50, I guess, of the 53 year. No, that was a line, but that was later, the agreement with Koreans. Yeah, but they made it straight away, and it seems to me that it was straight away, but I will not debate about that. But recently, that is called a new upgrade. 1 year ago, like literally last year, they agreed for a nuclear component. So it was like the Koreans, they pushed, and the Minister of Defense of the USA had a visit in order to ensure that the USA will use their nuclear power in case of nuclear attack from Northern Korea. So that's the same story, also the neighbor with nuclear weapons. But what is the huge difference in all of it? And that is one question. I don't know whether we will dive deep into it, but because we can talk a lot about that, and there is now a lot of proposals, like maybe Ukraine needs to think about some analogies. First, I heard the Korean scenario, very good scenario, because we stopped on the 38 parallel, and next, peacefully coexisting. Well, Korea is developing, Finland, again. Now it started because Finns, they said that, yeah, they need to realize their rights, but what? They give everything after the results of Veltentegeren. Others now will think about something else. What do you think? I know I am using that myself. Like the person cannot just stop using historical analogies. But then, okay, do you have such an analogy which will be more close to our realities? And if not, then what is your attitude to using analogies in such historical things? I will come back to Poland for a minute. I think we need a new agreement with Poland. Yeah, it's being prepared. Yeah, but it doesn't have the things that you're mentioning as of today. Please, people, hear us put into the agreement with Poland and USA possibility of their participation, of their armed forces on the territory of Ukraine. If USA is now not doing that, then Poland can do that because we have the basic agreement, which is outdated, but it is. It exists. Yeah, for sure. So we need to write about those opportunities, and even the reminder about that will be an important political signal that it can be done, and in the sense of a positive concept. It's very important and a very powerful step. I don't believe into analogies because I learned them quite in detail. Korea, Kashmir, like whatever, they won't work like that. And when somebody is trying, even like people whom I respect, and they are trying to explain me that, well, you are talking about the troops that will be present. If they will be present, it's what is called boots on the ground. It will be similar to Korea because there they were. And here we can explain a lot about why analogies don't work. But in our case, there will be Ukrainian decision. It won't be an analogy to something. It can't be ensured just by like observation to stop shooting. If this decision in certain point will start being discussed, it has to be sustainable. Sustainable decision or sustainable solution is how I see that as of today. If we have some transition period to NATO reality, and I see that mentality in Europe is kind of getting towards it because now Europe cannot allow itself to have some safety fluctuations. I think that Europe will come with some crisis to joint umbrella, and that won't be just nuclear umbrella. But as for now, there is lack of a lot of things, lack of solidarity, political will, etc. But 2 years ago, I remember how we were having negotiations with Germans. I won't call, but other European countries, let us say so, about weapons and any proposals. They were causing some shock. They were not just surprised, but it was real shock. And now they presented the joint plan. Yeah, a lot of ideas will be presented, some in the nearest future, some a bit later on. But I think that many European companies, including on producing weapons and new technologies, they have taken into account our possibilities for the future and the fact that NATO, like it's very hard for them with the consequence of political decisions. That was taken into account already in business who, where, and how, what should be used. And I think that the business will develop very fast. And I think that pushing political reality, which is with the inertia, this determination, I think that this wave, not the tsunami, but the wave which started right now, earlier, but we can see that in the European elections, it can, well, not just harm us, but it can help us. How? Because people who have significant positions among the right ones, they are really disturbed by European identity and defense of Europe as they see it. So this is kind of a stronger Europe. Well, I think that the right, because there are different right and partially Christian Democrats, they do want to lose Europe and they do understand that there is such a chance. That is 10 years ago, everybody was saying, like, yeah, Europe exists, it will always exist, we have some problems, we will figure it out somehow. As for today, like Macron, for example, and many others, they are saying, like, yes, Europe exists, but we need to fight for it. Just like in the well-known political slogan, Europe is not free of charge. Its safety existence is not free of charge, not just in money. And this mentality among the right ones, it's quite strong, I'd say. At least among those I'm talking to, and I'm talking to the Nordics and Italians and Spanish people. Italians. I was really surprised by the Prime Minister of Italy. She's helping us greatly, even though the expectations were the whole party. But the expectations that we have, by the way, now she had a huge. But Orban in Hungary, who is expecting that they will together have influence in Euro Parliament, but she is for supporting Ukraine, so she is pushing the other way. So that's interesting opinion. I haven't heard that earlier on. Yeah, I will say just a few sentences. This logic of strong Europe among the right, it's not just Meloni, Yeah, Germans have it. But the alternative of totally different reality, alternative is like they collected from the Russian agents of impact and others. So I think that alternative will collapse at a moment. And instead of those alternatives, other right ones will come. So now this story starts to wonder. There are Christian Democrats, but Christian Democrats, sometimes there are so right ones that you have to go to the right ones. Even my friends among Christian Democrats, they are more analogical in the positions of Meloni, what they are doing, not just about Ukraine, but regarding Europe. And as for Orban, I'm totally for it, for him to be taken to new political reality and to be held there strictly, so to say. I think it's the best option. Then he will be somewhere in the corner and he will do something like that. Well, actually, yes. So briefly, we summed up the elections to Euro Parliament. Well, if to speak in general, I guess you will agree that nothing there were no unprognosed things that happened. So the configuration did not change for us, but maybe we will hear more some separate deputies. In my opinion, we don't have some holistic, complex or even wide strategy for working with European rights. These connections have always been not bad, but very kind of disseminated and very personal. And now we need to work systemically with the right parties. And the question is whose task it is, how we are gonna solve it. And that's very important story. We have the answer. I have it and you have it. We have friendship parties in the parliament. Somebody is friends to somebody, but I think that it should be not the executive powers that will do that, not the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but a group of friendship in the parliament, some committees, and that is okay in European practice, those constant meetings. And it's not causing nothing bad in there. And of course, there should be some teams that are conducting the work. I know France, Germany, well, at least in these countries, Italy, to a smaller extent, they had different parties. Well, in Germany, they have a lot of parties, but in France, with different opinion. However, there was a period when Russian financing was present everywhere, even though they were representing different parties, but they had Russian financing. Well, the model of the parties is existing only for Germans, but, well, no, also Poland. Yeah, American, and also Poland, because Poland is really divided. Do we have some analogies? Because we have no analogies of those. That is ideological. There are different ideological directions in Ukraine, including those who can contact, and it's the specifics because it's bilateral basis, and each country has own specifics. And how that relationship will come to life? Yeah, from time to time we have that on in Hungarian direction and so on. How the institute is called. Central European Institute is working actively for Hungary and Slovakia. It's in Ukraine. Yeah, it's in Uzhhorod. And I think that at least in 3 countries, Hungary, Slovakia, and Romania, they are working very good. And this happened because Minister Klimkin, being back a minister, he was developing the relationship with those Santankos. Yeah, not just I wasn't the only one, but there was a whole team and they were really cool. And where is this approach right now? Well, okay, we won't talk about the ministry right now, but it's a very important topic. And now we will not raise this topic, but we do need a network of Sentamcos. I don't think that we need to be compared with someone, but Georgia, for example, in Georgia, they have a lot of different directions that are supported and they are working quite actively. They are working on some ideas, some intellectual part. It's much more complicated for us. It's hard to find cool experts for the projects that are existing already, and that's a huge problem of ours. Can you tell us, please? We have Centank, National Institute of Strategic Studies. It was created as the think tank. And since then until today, have you been invited to participate in some events at that institute? I guess once I was invited. Okay, then there is still some hope. I even remember some kind of a discussion, and it was about, I guess, Asian countries, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, indeed, it was more like the exclusion from the rule. Well, I think that Mr. Bohomolov, director of the institute, will hear us and he will do the things that were done with Mr. Hurbulin and Alexander Litvinenko, who is now in the Security Council, and other people for assessment of the situation. It's on the state level, but if we are talking about non-state, so yeah, we have also in Kyiv, you mentioned, those are episodes, and unfortunately, like among the parties, yeah, that is a problem for sure, because we have some generals that are cooperating with Ukrainian authorities, with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but they are really active in that, especially in today's conditions. It is clear that without some specific relationship with the authorities, it's impossible. But as for the parties, well, our parties didn't grow into independent projects. That is for the future. But now, what do? I guess we are using what we have. But we've got the parliament, deputies of the parliament, bilateral connections to get acquainted with the situation and to make some steps towards that. As for the Europe, just to add it up, we all know we won't talk here publicly about the personal attitude of Putin to Europe. There was one episode where we together heard clearly his attitude. And it was not for just one time. Well, he's not hiding that. If we listen even his public speeches in Valdai, well, that is, well, publicity is publicity, but when you see the person behind the curtain, so to say, well, yeah, okay. As far as it happened, he is not really respecting the Europeans, and I agree. In his opinion, Ukraine doesn't exist. It's got parallel models, and it's just some separatistic territory which will come back to them. As for Europe, it's more complicated because Europe exists, right? It exists, but it is weak, it's not capable. So that means the future world will be bipolar. Or I don't even know now, like maybe three polar. Because he was thinking about bipolar world, and now, and it's important, China, right? So when the China is totally like better developed than Russia and everyone is grouped around China, not around Russia, then it seems that Russia, that is becoming weaker, it has no space for that. If Europe, under such pressure of such threats, made incredible things lately, in my opinion, again, especially those are not changes of mentality, but some changes in their society and at the level of establishment. Well, Germany, cardinal changes from the point of view of their guilt during the Second World War. It seems to me that Putin took all of that on himself from them. He just kind of liberated them. You know Germany, and you've been working there for many years. And now, is Europe capable? Maybe not like straight away, but are they ready to return the ambitions, well, let us say so, to become a center of power? Having, from the point of view of economy, all the reasons for that. As for today, no. However, Europe's changing, and it understands that they will need to protect themselves, not just in a military way. And this understanding grows very slowly, but it's growing. They increase tolerance to expenditures for defense and security. That is not the way we would like to, but people in the questionnaires are saying that, yeah, they will need to increase the amount of money for it. They are looking for uneasy options, actually, I would say. I see how they are discussing the armed forces, where, as a matter of fact, like big private component will exist, just like it exists in Asian countries or around some things. That is, the discussions are now being held that earlier on were not available, neither for public or non-public discussion. This is happening very slowly. Very slowly. With a lot of nerves, but this is happening. Can Europe jump over our own head? I cannot answer this question. I think that it's 50-50. As of today, 50% that Europe will follow the flow of events, but 50% that Europe will realize that they need to find their place. And all of that, like from American policy and what I am calling like crisis American democracy, we're helping that from the other side than our war. Two fundamental things: our war and understanding that the states can change their logics, their vision of the world. And this is promoting that Europe realize status quo. Are they ready to change that? The answer is no. Are they ready to start working on that? And whether there will be some leaders, we'll see. As for now, I don't see real leaders in Europe who are ready to change that, but the new generation is coming up, and very interesting, again, about the right ones. We've been talking about that, like 30 plus, who can take Europe and can lead it somewhere. I hope for it. I'm trying to work with whom I can and support this discussion in terms of like intellectually and in terms of safety. Yeah, I agree. Now, this is not obvious, but with such Europe that will include Ukraine, like territorially, no matter how paradoxical it is. It's not like the paradox, but we can see that it is something that we need, but we do understand that still our threats will be bigger than their threats. But who knows what will happen next? What if there will be the competitiveness in Arctics? And then if Russia stays and starts having war for Arctics, is that going to be European Union? Well, not just those who have something to do with Arctics can have war for it. The Chinese people will do that for sure, yeah. But ending up the opinion about bipolar world, I think that there is one country that will never agree to bipolar world. Those are people from India. they are not ready to recognize that this reality is possible. They are not ready to become the world power as I see their mentality as of now. However, I think that in one generation, they will come to it. And the way of that generation will be interesting. And a lot of configurations will depend on it. And from how Europe will see Asia, because those, like people from India and Chinese people, a lot will depend on them. I do agree because the victory, like recently, of the prime minister, that is the concentration on the national also. That is the big, well, not big India, but strong India. Somebody thinks that it's a victory. Somebody thinks it's they lost. Well, the victory because he stayed, and an Indian model of democracy to stay in the position of the prime minister, I call it success. I call it a victory because different things happen in India, and the prime ministers were killed, and we'll see. At least from his speeches, I can say that he is perceiving that as a loss. Maybe we were not that confident in wide support of his. By the way, it's also a question I cannot answer. I'm not a specialist in this in India, and we don't. I think we have 2.5 specialists in India for all over Ukraine, and we need to hear them for them to say. Well, I think we will do it here on the platform of Ukrainian Crisis Media Center because indeed how the events are developing not just in the USA or Europe, but what is happening in India, Indonesia, and how there they have this development because it impacts. And now they are saying that India is becoming better than China. So indeed, they are not showing all the results yet. And it seems to me that Indian model, even though it looks seemingly less efficient than Chinese from the point of view of improvement of management, but I guess it's more progressive and it can give quite a quick result because Chinese starts to slow down. And well, we will see different factors play their role, but what I've seen in the USA, students from India, students from China. These are two different categories. And just look, CEO companies, how many representatives, CEO representatives are there now from big American companies? Yes, I do agree that I guess we are underestimating India from the point of view of the jump that they can make in the next few dozen of years. And yes, India won't agree for Chinese people to be dominating in some broad region that objectively these are two countries that are competing and both have nuclear weapons. And now their potential, well, I guess they can be compared as for now. China with Europe. I have a question. My sincere surprise, China that was moving last dozen of years successfully in their concept soft power, yeah, to use the non-power tools like single path, investments to economy, as a matter of fact, political domination. I've seen that in the Caribbean region where presence of China in constructing like the airport, the main roads, the port, main port, education, and IT park. All of that is China. All of that. And the only embassy of the big country is China, not even the USA, in the Caribbean region. There are such countries, well, mainly USA and China, but this is how it is. So they were okay, they were successful, and actually came to the model when business started, because in Chinese model, started working for the result. Business started going to the global level. We do know those examples, and then all of a sudden, such a rapid reassessment. And the speech of Xi Jinping on the meeting of the party, Taiwan, and force methods and very sharp actions regarding the business. Some people are leaving, some are taken to the jail as a matter of the fact. They are taking the businesses. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Ministry of Defense just disappeared. The Minister of Foreign Affairs is a catastrophe. You know his fate, huh? He died as a result in a jail. So no one knows why, but again, I read that in media, so no one can say where he is and what is happening. From the ambassador of the USA to the Minister of Foreign Affairs in China, and the person just disappears from the jail. So why this country, like successful model that was developing from the point of view of impact in the world, all of a sudden they are changing it for quite confrontational. They are taking the side of Russia in war against Ukraine. So I don't see any balance. So is that a trend, or such a strategy is a long term? Or maybe we might have some changes in this position, because it's weird. It's rating and China is just weakening that. I don't see anything super surprising regarding what is happening in China. In China, they see the world via the prism of strategic competition with the USA, not with the West, but with the USA. In China, they have consolidation, the process of competitiveness. They have development of their own technologies, own capacities, but also, I would say, executive structure, and I think that the structures of Chinese Communist Party is also belonging to executive to some extent, and it's a major difference with Russia because their parties are like simulacres just for existence, but there in China, it's real bureaucracy that is holding the society. So is there some personality factor of Xi Jinping? Maybe the Chinese leader got involved. But such changes, maybe with different timing, with different level, it happened with the Chinese leader because in China they have the understanding that the nearest 2 generations that they will happen under the sign of the strategic competitiveness. If you look at China as a country that is holding Russian PPA, then Chinese people, they don't see that. They don't see any side in our war. They are looking at that from the other point of view. They have the USA. They have the Western countries who are supporting us. At least the generation of Chinese investigators or researchers, Russian speaking, who are working there, they are still they're sympathizing today's Russia, but there are complicated discussions. These are not democratic discussions in our understanding, but they exist. And the same discussions are in the party regarding what to do next. And as far as we have the system of coordinates, and we are seeing that as a war against us, and they are seeing that from different prism, and their logics is totally different. So what I realized through the years of my work with Chinese people, with people from India, etc., and with Asian people, how we understand and perceive the reality, not mandatory, but it's even more how they understand this. Okay, then I have just a question how the system can exist when everyone is creating their model of understanding. So Putin is one understanding, Xi Jinping the other one. Why do we need international structures, international rules, if, like, China is officially it's reading the aggression and violation of UN rules as a crisis? Well, I said that we have a formal set of rules that we are recognizing in a sense, like formal declaration and with mantras. And they mentioned some principles regarding Ukraine. That is sovereignty and territorial wholeness. And it was against the UN resolution. And it was a call that Russian troops have to leave the territory of Ukraine. It means that formally, sticking to the principle, fundamentally, they are understanding that differently. Yeah, I'm sorry for interrupting, but Taiwan has no right for own existence. But some Russian initiatives on there have the right for existence. Here I need to mention a very important moment, because many people are trying to accept the attitude of China to Beijing and Taiwan and the attitude of Kremlin to us, because Chinese people are not perceiving it this way. Chinese people do understand that the war that is taking place between us is the war between the two countries. They are not perceiving Taiwan as a separate state. That is, they are considering that the situation as of today is a result of civil war. And we all remember how that was happening, the history, etc. So the Marshall's Plan, for example, is something just crazily positive, even though it wasn't Marshall who wrote that, but nevertheless, they gave us their political support and political push, and many are considering him to be a loser, because all his discussions with Mao Zedong and Chiang Kai-shek ended up with fundamental loss. So the attitude to Taiwan from the point of view of Beijing is fundamentally different, because they realize that these are two different situations, and they are recognized in official claims, and they see that in their policy. And by the way, always they are, well, I won't say that they are nervous, but they are really sensitive when they start comparing that. So Chinese people, they start from the fact that Russian war against us creates from they are trying to connect Russia to them, and as for now they don't see how to do that. And that's a fundamental question for them, and they are competition with the USA, and from the other side, this war is not helpful for them, because they cannot go to the new level and they cannot divide the West. What is their fundamental dream? Because they want to have European countries separately and Americans separately and so on and so forth, and they will be aiming at, just like most countries, not Western countries, Russia, not to win and not to lose. That's their opposition. Vision of that balance is different. However, that is their logics, and as of today, in today's reality, in my opinion, they are not able to get from that reality, because this is how they see the world. If you win the war, for them, that's the victory of the West, and they don't want the West to win. I'm not talking about the victory of the West, but I'm saying, like, how did it happen so that we cannot, well, not just we, but with our partners, and not just the USA, we're not able to give the definition and the framework of the UN Russian aggression against Ukraine, and that China is repeating Ukrainian crisis. In my opinion, it's not a parallel world, as you say. In my opinion, it's a conscious desire of capitulation of Ukraine to Russia on the principles that you mentioned. Because I don't think that we can allow in international systems to each country can interpret the norms of international law, the rules in their own way. If we start talk about the international law and everyone will do that their way, so that's not the way how this should be done. And I think that China is just kind of changing the notions, or because there is no second or third article of the UN Charter where it says about the aggression and violation of sovereignty and territorial wholeness that it can be called crisis in the country. Well, the issue is only that a big part of non-Western world sees understanding of those principles from the West, and also recalling everything starting from Yugoslavia and Iraq and so on and so forth. And Chinese people are treating that as the opportunity for themselves, like interpretation of principles of international law the way they want to. So, as a matter of fact, it started. We don't have neither international law nor international humanitarian law that we would understand similarly as of today in the world, and that is a fact in the reality of which we are. It won't change neither tomorrow nor the day after tomorrow, and I don't see how we are gonna right now legally some set, I guess, some process, if you want, of some key rules where everybody would join. That won't happen on today's transition stage. That is the world where we will continue just living. And the fact that we don't like the position of many people, yeah, of course, because this position is working for Russia. And actually, the things that are happening now in Chinese supplies, it's helping Russians, no matter how many schemes are stolen, but 90% of chips that are used as of today in Russian weapons, they are from China. And today's logics of China, we have to preserve this Russian asset, and they think that it's their asset. Yeah, it was not this way earlier, but for our logics, for our geopolitics, no matter how we see that from the point of view of like blaming China, India, somebody else in the non-Western world, we still have to work with them. And of course, there are some allies of Russia, like Nicaragua or somebody else, who are just with them. Nevertheless, my experience is that it's very, very hard, but in the world which is not Western, it's possible to explain your logics, and they should do that. I will make an example. A few months ago, if you, a very respected researchers from Arabic countries, they say, "Do you understand, Mr. Minister? We are looking at the claims of Putin and the order from International Criminal Court, and we are reading the Convention of Geneva, and we see that in case of war, children who have no education, occupation authorities has to organize based on similar cultural principles for them, and we are treating that. After that, we had like 1.5 hours discussion approximately, and as a result, some of them, they were taking some careful positions, some not really careful. I succeeded in persuading them that there are no double standards. However, they are saying that this is a common point of view, and this is the example that without talking to them, we are losing a lot of serious opportunities. And in the reality, as for now at least, from the point of view of access to them, we are losing. We are losing not just to Russia, but to all others. We have minimal opportunities. They are minimal, like human, financial, etc. However, if we won't use those minimal opportunities, we are giving the West, which is not pro-Ukrainian, and it won't be pro-Ukrainian. We are giving it away there. So I would not abandon that work. And in general, part of international activity, it is not about talking to our friends and allies and partners, no matter what kind of discussion it is, nice discussion or a bad discussion, but we should talk to those with whom it is hard to speak because they see the world differently and we need to understand the reasons why they see the world differently. Otherwise, we are just missing the fact that we can impact their position. I do agree that China absolutely consciously is treating that the way it is treating, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't talk about what does it mean for China? What are the consequences? What are the consequences for their development? What are the consequences for the safety system? Because European safety system, it matters for China. It's important discussion. Unfortunately, not everyone in this world is pro-Ukrainian. Even more, people are not considering whether they are pro-Ukrainian or pro-Russian. That is our system of coordinates. At a certain point, we have to understand and accept that this is not the way how many or most countries in the world are treating that, and we have to accept this. Maybe not really good system of coordinates, and it's not just for Chinese people. Just look, many other countries. Are they taking better position in terms of us, like people of Brazil, Southern Africa? I'm not talking about all the other Africa. And Brazilian people are better than China. However, we will see how that will develop. I'm a bit worried. Well, summing up, I absolutely believe that, yeah, we need to explain, we need to cooperate with China, but I don't know how to. I've been working with them till the moment when they ask me to say clear anti-American position. To be honest, I think that it's not like the competition, which is absolutely clear, but this is something anti-American that can become very serious Chinese ideology. But the fact that we need to communicate with everyone, yes, not just communicate, but have the channels, like the official position and unofficial position, supportive position. If in Delhi they have the annual security summit, maybe you know how Delhi is inviting to the summit with official channels. I've never been there, by the way. That is bad. However, I do know that in the other points you were, and in China, in Africa, in Latin America. However, in Delhi, the event was very important, and Russia participated. That is the Minister of Foreign Affairs. He was there, and these invitations are going to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and to the Office of the President. Yep. Who participated from Ukraine? Who is representing Ukraine? We won't speak about that. But there was a person. There was a person determined by the ministry. By the way, with Indians, we didn't talk a lot about Indians. They also have their assessment of geopolitics, and we need to work with them in systemic manner because they have their system of think tanks. For example, the team around, well, you mentioned about the Institute for Strategic Researches, and around their Council of Europe, and the advisor is a practical person who actually can come to that in any moment. They have some system of people Yeah, hundreds of those. It's hard for me to say how many of them are there. And this includes everyone who is respected and their system is working. So we need to be in Indian events as well. It's impossible to do everything. Yeah, I underline that. That's a very important moment. If Shangri-La, for example, where Singapore, yeah, if there is invitation, also like parallel or horizontal people from the expert environment, then in India, the system, the group is called council. They are preparing the conference. There is Ministry for Foreign Affairs, many other representatives. They are inviting via official channels. This is the difference. So in a given case, this narrow bottle, which is going via Banco, not even the Ministry for Foreign Affairs, they think who will participate. And very often they are not choosing the person, or it's somebody who's not going to speak. And given case our participant did not want to make something unpleasant to Lavrov. And the other unpleasant thing was done because Lavrov mentioned that it was not Russia who started the war, and everybody was just laughing from that. So in India, they understand that properly, even though it's also like the foreign, it's the Indian people, they don't perceive that in general. I look at the clock, so it's a lot of time already, and still we need to add it up. However, we want to, and you mentioned about important things. We cannot cover everything, right? It's important to talk about Latin America and Argentina, which now is making like first step, second step, how that will be. And also Bolivia, who just bought things from like interesting things. Bolivia with their revolutionary traditions. This is how it happened with that country. Just for a second, I will say I was the only one Ukrainian authority who many years ago visited Bolivia for official political consultations. That was the only one in history case. After that, there were no other visits, and Bolivia was always just a country of the left. Even Che Guevara, he was fighting as Bolivia, and he died as a result. That's a unique country, but again, it doesn't mean that even with such countries, we shouldn't work. That is, Russia met on the level, which level? Russian nuclear station. Yeah, in Latin America, we have some things. Maybe it is not simple to play with it, but we have some interesting partners. We know how to work. We won't have results tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. However, even though they are not part of that world, they, in many things, in many ways, they have not the same but similar mentality. That is, if Asia is fundamentally different mentality or Africa is fundamentally different mentality than with Latin America, we have more opportunities for what is called advocacy. And we need to work in this direction. And I know that our civil society is doing quite good things. The only thing is that it's a complicated story. However, Asia and Africa, you cannot just come. You have to build some systemic story in here. As for Latin America, I am absolutely sure that we have some chances. Even though it is very difficult in Latin America, very often the policy, like in Brazil, for example, like sixth economy of the world of all or Bolsonaro's people, and nothing is there in the center. No, even like bog. And this is the situation in many countries. We need to understand that. We need to understand why this is happening, and while we, until the moment, well, we will work with the world, and we will make sure that the world understands us, and we understand the world, and Much more people should do it. And these are not just the state opportunities, and the world won't see us till then. And I think that we have someone to learn from, like to learn some things, like people from Poland, etc. But our model should be Ukrainian. If we will not make it, it will be hard for us. Latin America? Yeah, we have some prospects there. They are complicated, but they do exist. In my opinion, they are easier for implementation than Asia and Africa. Multiple times. Much simpler. I will not contradict. In recently Ukrainian Crisis Media Center here, we had representatives of Brazil and Argentina and Colombia. Yeah, and by the way, it's in cooperation with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and it's very good that this American strategy was adopted, and everything's fine with the strategies, I guess, from our side. We just don't have some amendments in the strategy of national security or something like that, because still it's a war, and in this strategy, now we have China as our strategic partner, but it's a separate topic how to react dynamically to changes. I don't want to touch upon the topics that are about or details of efficiency and external economic activity. It's a different topic, and it's for a few more hours, but the main issues we've discussed. I would say that I won't say that I understand all the answers. There's a lot of different factors, a lot of things might change, but the main tendencies were outlined. Blitz. Should I ask Blitz? I never ask anyone, but as journalists say, yes or no, Yeah, I will even prepare the microphone. Okay, then I will ask you the Blitz, and we will end up with that. So the first question I just wanted to ask about the presence of NATO on the territory of Ukraine. You already answered that. I want to outline it. That is, NATO will be on the territory of Ukraine. And the other question, whether it's realistic for Ukraine to be invited to NATO in the next 5 years. Yeah, but for that, we have to have certain conditions, and that's a separate topic. However, nevertheless, I think that the answer is yes. All the other questions are very simple. However, nevertheless, I would like to ask the question. According to the results of this broad-scale phase of fighting with Russia, can we deoccupy the territories? Not this year, in general. On this stage, to deoccupy the territories, including Crimea. I think it's a prospect, maybe of middle term. And there won't be we won't have very simple answers there. I think that there might be some transitioning answers. However, I am sure that for these territories won't be Russian for a long term. And in general, Russia will not turn to the world without the occupation, will not come back to the world without deoccupying the territories. So at a certain point, they have to understand their benefits from the fact that actually occupation is destroying Russia as such. However, for that, they need to change the regime. And in my opinion, such a sign has to be that they do understand that there is Ukraine, not Russia, not anti-Russia, and just to fundamental change of Russia. Maybe when they will understand that Ukraine exists, and now it's far to that. Thank you. I won't bring any conclusions. I think that those who wanted to hear for their considerations, the question of prognosis and scenarios is still open. I think we can talk about that during the next period, and still consciously I didn't touch upon the current situation, Summit of Peace or the conference, NATO summit, G7, bilateral meeting in the USA, a lot of things I didn't mention. So I reserve the opportunity to talk about that in a few months, I guess, about scenarios. As for now, we are in a situation when we need to consider. Thank you. It was interesting. Some moments need some, I guess, additional analysis, and I outlined some of the phrases myself, especially in this context that everything will really start only when Russia and also Ukraine understand that we are not just different, but how it all changed the configuration. And yeah, not just understand, but they have to realize that it's good that we are different. Well, this will be the change. That they don't just understand that we are different, but they understand that it's beneficial for everyone. Well, I think they missed this moment already. However, still, we will end on this optimistic note, and for them to understand better, I think that I have such an opinion that they start understanding better when something hits them. Well, not to civilians, because there it's vice versa. They have some hatred, but military objects. Where their forces are, the Crimea, in that zone that Putin made up for himself, sanitary zone, then they start talking about something. They respect power. So I think that our position, yeah, we understand it has to be that it's not my opinion. I'm just kind of what I heard, that we have to treat everything not just from our point of view. We need to understand the position of others, and maybe then we will be able to impact somehow. And secondly, we realize also from the very logics of discussion that this year things won't end. It will be even this phase of the broad-scale invasion when it is going to different stage. But as for now, yeah, we are developing the positions. And also I would like to pay attention, India, because India doesn't sound this way, like in expert discussions or something. Yeah, almost nothing is mentioned. Well, and China is almost not mentioned, and if it is mentioned, then it really is simplified and linear way. Yeah, so and about the efficiency of external political activity regarding scenarios, of course, we have to speak separately about that. Thank you very much, Mr. Pavlov, for this discussion. Thanks to all of those who had been watching or will watch our 2 hours of discussion, because we will have that in the recording in Ukraine and abroad, and that will help in developing some external policies. Thank you very much for your